Most people never question the system they're born into. They wake up, they work, they pay taxes, they save what little remains, and they call that routine freedom. But hidden beneath that routine is a silent agreement, one most people never consciously accepted. It is the agreement that their future years not yet lived, paychecks not yet earned, productivity not yet measured, belongs not to them, but to a machine older than any government and larger than any empire, a machine fueled by debt. The most unsettling part is this. You became collateral long before you learned how to write your own name. This is not the beginning of a conspiracy. It is the beginning of a pattern so deeply woven into the fabric of global economics that nearly every nation on Earth depends on it, yet almost no citizen understands it. A pattern that transformed ordinary people into the silent foundation of the world's largest financial structure. To see how it happened, we must go back not just to the birth of central banking, but to the birth of the very idea that governments could borrow unlimited amounts of money as long as the people kept working. Centuries ago, money had limits. Gold was heavy. Silver was scarce. Coins could not be printed or multiplied at the speed of political desire. Rulers who wanted to wage long wars or build massive empires faced the harsh boundaries of physical resources. Then something changed. Quietly, permanently. Governments discovered a trick they could borrow from the future. They could issue debt promises of future repayment, and use those promises to spend money that did not exist yet. This was the birth of sovereign debt, the first major shift that would eventually lead to the world we live in today. The elites of the time believed they had outsmarted history. They believed they had unlocked unlimited power. They created something else instead, a system that required constant growth. Fueled by never-ending borrowing, a system that slowly, silently, shifted the burden from rulers to populations. The state could borrow, but the state did not repay. People did. Every tax collected, every fee implemented, every inflationary policy approved, it all fed the machine. For centuries, governments borrowed mostly for war. War was expensive, resources were finite, and victory required constant funding. But by the 1800s, a new idea emerged. Governments could borrow not just for war, but for everything: roads, canals, railroads, social programs, political promises, and later corporate bailouts. Debt became normal, then necessary, then foundational. The biggest shift came when central banks took control of national currency systems. Instead of money being tied to gold or silver, it became tied to policy, to interest rates, to the decisions of a small group of unelected individuals who controlled the heartbeat of a nation's economy and the people. It became the implicit backing behind every borrowing decision. The 1970s changed everything. Until then, the world's currencies were still tethered, however loosely, to gold, placing limits on how much governments could borrow, spend, or print. But in 1971, when the link to gold was severed completely, money became something new: pure credit. A currency backed not by metal, but by trust, and whose trust mattered most, not the government's, but the people's. If citizens continued working, earning, spending, and paying taxes, the system survived. They didn't, the model collapsed. From that day forward, citizens became collateral, not legally, not explicitly, but structurally. The global financial system began to operate on a single assumption: that future generations would be productive, enough to pay for the decisions of the past. Behind every dollar, every euro, every yen, every rupee, is a silent calculation. How much can the population produce? How much can the population be taxed? How much can the population absorb before breaking? The world does not run on gold anymore. It runs on your future output. Your country borrows money today by promising your labor tomorrow. Governments secure loans by using the predictable, steady stream of taxes generated by millions of people working every single day. This is why economic crises rarely punish governments. They punish citizens. Governments can print money. Citizens cannot. Governments can restructure debt. Citizens cannot. Governments can inflate away their mistakes. Citizens cannot. When the system needs relief, the pressure is absorbed by the millions of people who wake up each morning and try to survive inside a machine that assumes ownership of their future productivity. The shift did not happen through a vote, did not happen through a law. It happened through design. Central banks turned credit expansions into national lifelines. Politicians turned borrowing into political oxygen. Corporations turned debt into profit. Governments turned citizens into the default guarantee behind every national policy. The formula became simple: more debt, more spending, more inflation, more tax revenue, more collateral. Every time prices rise, citizens are forced to spend more. More spending means more taxable activity. More taxable activity means stronger government revenue. Stronger government revenue means borrowing becomes cheaper. Inflation is not a mistake. It is fuel. You are the fuel. The modern global economy is built on an unspoken hierarchy. Central banks create money. Governments borrow it. Corporations receive it. Citizens pay for it with their labor, with their taxes, with their time, with their futures. You are not a participant in the system. You are a stabilizer. Citizens are the guarantee that keeps the engine running. The world's total debt is now so large that repayment is mathematically impossible. The only way to sustain it is through expansion. More spending, more borrowing, more inflation, more growth. But growth is slowing. Populations are aging. Automation is replacing jobs. Housing is becoming unaffordable. When governments look at a declining birth rate, they don't see a demographic issue. They see a revenue problem. Fewer workers lead to less tax revenue. Reduced ability to service debt, increased reliance on printing, higher inflation, and more pressure on citizens. The system has reached a point where ordinary people are carrying the weight of decisions made decades before they were born. To truly understand how citizens became collateral, you must understand the moment the system realized it could extract more than just taxes. It could extract time. Time became the ultimate asset, the invisible resource governments could sell to lenders, the real backing behind national currencies. When a government issues debt, it is not borrowing money. It is borrowing years of future productivity from millions of people who never signed a contract, never saw the agreement, and never had the chance to refuse. Governments panic during recessions not because of unemployment, not because of corporate losses, but because unemployed citizens don't generate taxable activity. A drop in employment is not merely a social problem. It is a collateral problem. A population that isn't working cannot support the debt. And when the collateral weakens, the system begins to crack. In the last 50 years, governments stopped trying to pay off their debts not because they were irresponsible, but because the system literally cannot function without debt. Governments borrow to stimulate the economy. Stimulated economies generate more spending. More spending increases tax revenue. Higher tax revenue justifies even more borrowing. Like a drug, the system builds tolerance. Each generation needs more debt than the last to maintain the illusion of stability. Debt is no longer a financial tool. Debt is the operating system. But this operating system has a flaw. It relies on a constantly expanding population. When populations stop expanding, the system begins to suffocate. Birth rates fell below replacement levels. Workforce size shrank. The number of retirees rose. This was not just a demographic crisis, it was an economic emergency. Fewer workers meant less tax revenue. Less tax revenue meant weaker collateral. Weaker collateral meant governments needed another strategy: immigration. Not for cultural diversity. It's not for humanitarian idealism, but because the system needed more workers to sustain the debt. Every new worker meant another stream of taxable activity. Every taxable activity meant stronger collateral. The debt-based model demanded it. Governments began to view populations the way corporations view supply chains, as resources to be maintained, expanded, and strategically managed. A shrinking population wasn't a social change. It was an existential threat to the credit model. But even with migration, policy adjustments, and economic reforms, the machine could not maintain speed. The global economy was running on a treadmill, accelerating faster than populations could keep up. Governments reached for the next lever: cheap money. Interest rates fell, then fell again, until they were near zero. Cheap money created an explosion in borrowing. Governments borrowed, corporations borrowed, individuals borrowed. Debt became oxygen, and for a moment it felt like prosperity. Housing prices soared, stock markets surged, corporate valuations exploded. Government deficits ballooned without consequence. But prosperity built on cheap money is not real prosperity. It is a mirage. Beautiful, convincing, temporary cheap money created winners and losers. Winners saw their assets rise. Losers saw the cost of living rise faster than wages. And beneath it all, citizens became more deeply entangled as collateral, because cheap money always leads to the same destination: inflation. Inflation is the most silent form of taxation. It steals value without leaving fingerprints. When prices rise, your money loses power. When your money loses power, you must spend more. When you spend more, the government collects more taxes. Inflation strengthens the collateral base while weakening the population that supports it. You don't see the extraction, you feel it. When rent consumes half your income, when groceries cost more each month, when savings shrink instead of grow, when the future becomes harder to plan, the most subtle extraction happens without a single price change through currency design. Your country issues money that loses value over time. Your wages rise slower than inflation. Your debt grows faster than your ability to pay it. Your savings melt like ice in the sun. Every part of the system is engineered to move wealth from the population to institutions built on debt. This is not corruption, it is structure. The system cannot survive without constant human input work, tax, compliance, belief. Most people don't realize how much belief fuels the financial system. But belief is everything. And governments know this. Confidence keeps a currency stable. Confidence keeps debt sustainable. Confidence prevents bank runs. Confidence prevents collapse. The greatest fear of any government is not recession, not unemployment, not even default. The greatest fear is loss of confidence. Because when people stop believing, the collateral evaporates. When collateral evaporates, the system collapses. The financial crisis of 2008 exposed the system. People believed banks were solid, they were not. Corporations seemed safe, they were not. Regulators appeared in control, they were not. The system cracked, and the response was predictable: more debt. Central banks slashed interest rates to zero. Governments issued record-breaking debt. Trillions of dollars were created with a few keystrokes. And who absorbed the consequences? Not banks, it's not corporations. The people did. Housing became unaffordable. Wages stagnated, exploded. Savings collapsed. Currency values eroded. Citizens carried the weight of institutional mistakes. Then came the pandemic. 2020 froze the global economy. Businesses closed. Flights stopped. Factories shut. Workers stayed home. Consumption fell off a cliff. For a moment, the machine ran out of fuel. Collateral stopped moving. Governments printed, borrowed, and injected trillions. The debt machine consumed more in 2 years than in the previous 10. The economy collapsed. People stayed home. Production halted. Yet the stock market soared. Corporate wealth exploded. Asset values reached record highs. How citizens were no longer just collateral, they became the product. Every stimulus check, subsidy, injection was designed to restore consumption. Because consumption meant taxes, taxes meant collateral, and collateral meant survival. The machine no longer needed functioning citizens, it needed spending citizens. Even if the money wasn't theirs, even if borrowed from their future, even if it increased the national burden they would eventually inherit. The quiet shift was complete. A deeper, quieter shift almost no one noticed happened in ownership. People stopped owning things, and things started owning them. Subscriptions replaced purchases. Cars were leased. Homes mortgaged for decades. Digital goods stopped being yours. In a world drowning in debt, ownership became a threat. Because when you own things outright, you stop paying interest. And the machine needs interest the way a body needs oxygen. Ownership became inconvenient. System replaced it with access, a softer, friendlier word, but a word transferring power from citizen to creditor. When you are given access instead of ownership, your freedom narrows, your dependence grows, your collateral value increases. A dependent population is predictable. Predictable payments make investors comfortable. This is not marketed as a loss. It is marketed as convenience. Don't buy the phone, finance it. Don't buy the car, lease it. Don't own the software, subscribe. Don't save for the house, take a mortgage. Don't build wealth, borrow. People believed it. Debt can feel like freedom until it isn't.